One of my top priorities when it comes to photography and video production is efficiency, but efficiency doesn't mean cheap. But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button, and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind-the-scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. I think this is a common misconception that can easily be confused, that somehow by being efficient, you're sacrificing quality, or it's a race to the bottom to be the cheapest possible product, being the most affordable. And that's not true. Efficiency actually comes with more profitability. And honestly, you don't really have to sacrifice quality all that often when you're focused on efficiency, but you really are maximizing your effort. Instead of needing 10, 20, 50 people to get a job done, if you can do it with 1, 2, 3, or 4, you can be a lot more efficient. And this is obvious. This should be common sense. But so often in life, I think humans chase size, quantity, growth, and they often limit their ability to focus on efficiency. If there's a problem, it's very easy to throw more people at it, throw more money at it, throw more resources at it, all the while not considering how you could just be more efficient to solve that problem. Maybe the problem doesn't even need to be a problem in the first place. Maybe there's a solution you can come up with that prevents the problem from existing, or you can handle the problem in a more efficient, tactical way rather than just throwing people, money, and resources at the problem. And yet, so often in life, that becomes the quick gut reaction, the go-to. Everyone wants to just add more people, add more time, energy, resources, all that stuff. And what happens is that is inherently against efficiency, and it makes things incredibly inefficient. This happens all the time: the bloat, the waste, the excess, and then the expectation or the mindset that you need these things to get the job done. You need this many people, you need this much money, you need these types of resources to actually achieve what you're trying to do. All the while, you could just approach it with a different mindset, focused on efficiency. How can I get this done with as few people as possible, with as few resources as possible? And guess what? That has nothing to do with how much you're charging for the project, because that's a totally separate equation, right? If it cost you $50,000 to do a video, let's say, just 50,000, some large number. There's certainly projects that are more expensive than that, but that's a decently sized project, right? $50,000. But it costs you $45,000 to do it. Well, you're making $5,000 profit. Maybe you walk away, and maybe there's a little bit of excess unexpected cost, last minute stuff, and maybe it eats away at that even more. Maybe you go over budget or something like that. Meanwhile, you could charge $50,000 for a project, and if it only costs you $5,000 or $10,000 to do it, well, great. You're well into profit. You can invest in the future. You can do all sorts of stuff. And this happens at any level. 50,000 might sound like a really big number to you, so let's use a smaller number. There's plenty of people who want to come in and cut costs and do things as cheaply as possible. Happens oftentimes when people are new in the industry. They're just getting started and they try and undercut what the professionals are charging so that they can get work too. And that's totally valid. That's competition. That's just the nature of the cycle of work. As you start out, you charge a little. As you grow in your career and your skill set, you charge more. And so maybe you're brand new to photography or video production. You come in, $100 or $500. That'll get the job done. But if it costs you $1,000 to do it, well, that's not efficient. That's not smart. That's not good business sense. You're losing money just by doing it. And you'd be better off working for yourself, investing in your own portfolio versus chasing clients who aren't paying you enough to actually get the job done. Vice versa, if you charge $500, but it only costs you $50 to do the project, well, then you're golden. That's great. That's good business. That's smart. That's strategic. So it's always about weighing the cost to do it, or what you're charging versus what the cost is to do it, and making sure that you're making profit every step of the way. If you want to run a business, if you want to be a professional, whether you're a photographer, a filmmaker, anything, you have to make more than what it costs you to do it. That's obvious. That's common sense. But an easy way to maximize that equation is to focus on efficiency. It is very easy to lose sight of this, to get distracted by all the glamour and the clout that comes with having a big crew and fancy equipment, and it takes us a long time and we need all these people, and I'm going to do a project, $100,000 project, and you're going to spend $100,000 to do it. that you might as well be charging $100 and spending $100. And I granted, there are parameters for every project. Without getting into specifics, without evaluating your exact project, I can't tell you where you could cut costs or how you could do things more efficiently, but it doesn't mean just being cheaper. It doesn't mean sacrificing quality. It just means working smarter, not harder. There's a lot of old cliches. I've been looking at old fables. These truths are true for ages. Is because it's the human condition. Our biology wires us a certain way where people just tend to do the same things over and over. It doesn't matter how good the technology is. It doesn't matter, how many books you've read or how many lessons you've taken. Human beings tend to fall into the same traps over and over, decade after decade, century after century. And yet you can pause all that and you can just change your mindset and think, okay, how do I achieve maximum quality? Because let's say that's a non-negotiable. You're not willing to sacrifice quality, which I think is admirable. And that's what I try and do. I don't want to sacrifice quality, but I do want to do my projects as efficiently as possible, because otherwise I'm just adding bloat, I'm adding waste, I'm adding excess, and I'm not really getting the value out of it. Think of how, if I needed 50 people for a project, if all of them were operating at maximum efficiency, it would be way better than 50 people that weren't focused on efficiency at all. And again, that's just kind of common sense. It's kind of obvious, but it's what gets lost so often on shoots, on production, on projects over and over again, because the easiest gut reaction is just to throw more people at a problem, throw more money at a problem, instead of actually thinking through of how to solve it. There's something that often comes up when I'm working on things, and it's there are 1,000 different ways to do a project. There's 1,000 different solutions to any one problem, but there's usually only one or two solutions that are the best, that actually do work and get the job done without adding extra waste or cost or creating further problems down the line. This happens all the time because any question, when it's subjective, may have multiple answers. You could approach it 1,000 different ways, because in the creative space, when everyone has their opinion, when everyone has their own idea, there are a lot of possibilities, there are a lot of options. But when time is limited, when resources, when budget, when staff is limited, there are only a few solutions that actually pay off and actually work. And if you can whittle down to those one or two, even then there's still kind of the clear answer, the obvious choice. I like to use the analogy of recipes and cooking in the kitchen all the time. If you have a set of ingredients in your kitchen, you don't have the grocery store, you don't have Costco in your kitchen, you have a set of ingredients. And so if you're looking of what should I cook for dinner tonight, you can't have every dish possible in the world. Oh, I had this fancy dinner one time in Italy and I'd love to recreate that at home. If you don't have the ingredients, you're going to be sacrificing something. It may not just be possible, or you're going to go through all these steps, all these hurdles to ultimately deliver something that wasn't even achievable. You've got ketchup and you don't even have proper tomato sauce. If you have the ingredients you have, use them to make something good. You got ketchup? Okay, maybe make a burger, maybe make a hot dog, maybe make the best burger or hot dog based off the ingredients you have. So any project is the same kind of way. You have your ingredients, you have your people, you have your budget, you have your time. The fast, cheap, or good, that's also part of this equation, right? You've heard that. Fast, cheap, or good, pick two of them. You can't have all three. These things are cliches. They're common because it is good wisdom. And we try and distill wisdom down into little catchphrases or little cliches. And if you find a way to embrace that and think through it and say, okay, I want to do the best quality possible, which again is admirable. That's what I want to do. Okay, so if it's fast, cheap, or good, okay, so good is non-negotiable. We have to have that. So now we can focus on cheap or we can focus on fast. And that's the other part of the equation, right? Do you want to just be cheap to be cheap? No, but you can through efficiency. You can cut your costs without sacrificing that quality by thinking through things of like, what tools am I using? What processes am I going through? There's a lot of times where process adds so much time. And again, you can't be fast as part of that equation because you're just inherently wasting time doing something the slow way. There are a lot of things. One of them, for example, that just off the top of my head that I can think of, but there's countless examples of this. And I did a video about it. You can look it up, of how to process audio before your edit. You process audio in one click. If I can remember, I'll put a link to it somewhere in this video. but you can search on the channel, how to process your audio in one click. That process went from, I saw people, editors, who would spend sometimes weeks mastering their audio levels on a bigger project, right? It was maybe multiple episodes. If each episode was like 10 minutes, maybe it's like 100 minutes of content, processing audio, spending weeks just getting their levels set. Meanwhile, you can do all of that in less than probably 10 seconds in Audition with the match loudness tool. There's things like that. There's the conventional, traditional way of painstakingly manually adjusting something, or there's the new, and I can't say they're automated. I mean, some of them are just automated, but others are just a process, a technique that's a shortcut, that's a speed, hack, time-saving, efficiency boost that has no compromise in terms of quality. And if it creates any problems, they're small, little, tiny ones that you would have, that previously everything was a manual process. 100% of the work was very tedious, very manual. Now maybe only 1% of it is the tedious manual stuff. 99% of it has been solved by a process, a technique, a simple solution in Audition, something like match loudness. That's just one example. There's plenty of them across the board. How I color grade with an adjustment layer over everything, matching all my footage to one color space, and then using adjustment layer over all of it to color grade in one layer. That is an efficiency boost that I can't tell you how many hours, days probably, that has saved me, weeks maybe in the course of my career, just not having to tweak color clip by clip, individually changing something over here, copy and pasting over here, doing it over and over and over again. It's the reason things like presets and templates exist, because they just help with efficiency. Now, that does sometimes come with the cost of, if you're using a template, it maybe is kind of generic, but it's a good starting point. If you change it, if you tweak it, if you modify it to customize it, now you're in a much better spot. And there's also the things of just not biting off more than you can chew, not taking on more than you can handle. A lot of times people will be very ambitious with their creative ideas. They will think big, and they'll have these wonderful, wonderful ideas. But if they don't actually add to the project, if they're not factored into the budget, and you're choosing to do something a crazy, creative, hard, difficult way that wastes a lot of time but doesn't really add value, why are you doing it? Just because you can? I guess that's a flex you can take on just to do it. Sure, fine. But that's not scalable. That's something you can do one time, but you can't do that over and over and over again as a business, as someone who's trying to make a profit, to sustain themselves, to sustain a team, to build a business with longevity. It needs to be sustainable. So you can't take on, like spectacle type production. You might see a Marvel movie or an Apple commercial and think, oh, I'd love to recreate that. Apple is the classic example. They are one of the biggest companies. They might be the biggest company in terms of cash. I don't know where they stand currently, but they have a lot of money, deep, deep pockets. Apple has a ton of resources and money that they can throw at their projects. And if you're an independent creator or a small team, or you're working with a client and they say, we want something like an Apple commercial, how are you going to achieve that? You're not Apple. You don't have, I'm willing to bet you don't have those financial resources. And if you do, or what's more likely going to happen is you're going to say, listen, that's a great idea. Apple makes great commercials, but that's going to cost X, Y, and Z. And the client or whoever is going to say, okay, well, I don't have that amount of money, but can you do it anyway? And your answer probably should be, no, I can't. It's just not possible. Because again, that would be biting off way more than you could chew. How are you going to achieve Apple level quality if you don't have those resources? Maybe through efficiency, you could get close. There are plenty of people who make Apple spec commercials, kind of recreations, and they're actually quite impressive. And usually all it takes is one or two people thinking through it. Listen, we don't have those resources of Apple, but we can achieve similar results by doing it a little different or doing it our own way. And those are the moments where you can think and go, wow, okay, efficiency is powerful, but you have to think through it and you have to take a different approach. If you're trying to be Apple, making an Apple commercial at their level, and trying to do it their way without those resources, it doesn't add up. Instead, you can take a path of efficiency and maybe you can achieve something similar, or you have to pick the right Apple commercial. Apple has plenty of commercials and keynotes and all sorts of examples. There's some that maybe are achievable through efficiency with a handful of people. Others may require technology and resources that you just don't have. So you also have to know when to say yes and when to say no, and what's reasonable and what's not. I like to focus on efficiency because it allows me to operate a lot faster and more affordably. So let's be real, it is more affordable to be efficient, but that doesn't mean that things are just cheap or low quality or low effort. It's just about thinking through the process and not, being efficient isn't buying the cheapest camera. Being efficient isn't buying the cheapest computer. Being efficient isn't using free software. That's not what efficiency means. Efficiency is all about process, procedure, technique, and figuring out, okay, what is the best camera, the right tool for the job? And oftentimes that's not the most expensive and it's not the cheapest. It's somewhere in the middle. Something in the middle is going to give you the best bang for your buck, the highest value, which is, that's another thing I always talk about because it is related to efficiency. What's going to give you the most value? Because value we can think of in terms of features. Yes, features are valuable, but if they cost more than they return, then there's not a whole lot of value there, actually. And there's plenty of things that may not be a feature on paper, but it's a hidden benefit or something, an unforeseen benefit that you get by using a particular tool, and you realize, wow, this actually speeds things up. This makes it a lot easier, simpler. Simple is a huge part of efficiency. The simpler, the better. A lot of times, I think there's the classic example of, I don't know if this is a true story or not, but it gets told enough like it is, that NASA was trying to figure out how they could write in zero gravity, and the pens weren't working in space, and so they had to develop some custom NASA pen that allowed you to write in zero gravity. And then the question was, how did the Russians solve the problem? And they just used pencils. I don't know if you've heard that story or not, but usually, and again, I don't know if it's 100% true. Maybe there's some truth to it, but it's that mindset that the simple solution is usually the better one. If you have to invent brand new technology, which is admirable, it is, if you have the resources and you can invest in R&D, go for it. But you've recreated a zero gravity pen when you could have just used a pencil. And those things come up all the time, daily, even when you're talking about photography and video production. Do you need the most expensive equipment? Do you need to bring everything? Do you need to go overkill just to create something you could have done with natural light? I don't know. It depends on the project. Do you need 10 cameras when maybe 1 or 2 would be sufficient? I don't know. You have to decide that for your project. It's always decision making. It's always problem solving. But I will tell you, the moment you start saying, well, we need more people, we need more money, we need more resources, try and stop yourself from going there right away as your first reaction, as your first instinct. Maybe there is a way to do the project with less people, with less money, with less resources. But what you charge can be the exact same. You don't have to lower your cost or increase your cost. You can have an efficient mindset, an efficient approach for what you're doing. And the cost is based on the final deliverable. What's the value you're creating? How you do it is your business. It doesn't really matter to the client how the project gets done. If it's a $50,000 project and you're delivering $50,000 of value, maybe on some level they care how much it costs you to do it. Again, it's not about just doing it cheap, showing up with your phone and saying, yeah, this is good enough, $50,000, here you go. Because that's the other easy trap to fall into of just, I'm going to do it lazily, in that mindset. I'm just going to do it with whatever I have, some scraps, and I'll cobble together and I'll overcharge for what I'm creating. That's not what I'm recommending. I'm saying if you're able to deliver $50,000 of value to a client, you don't spend $49,000 to make it. Find a way to do it efficiently where everything equals out and it's kind of a balance. There is a level of profitability that is probably too great. Like if the project, it was $50,000 project and 90% of that was profit, I would kind of question that and go, really? Like you didn't need to throw a few more resources at it. You couldn't, you really thought that your Canon Rebel from 15 years ago was the best camera to get this job done? Like, But at the same time, if it's a $50,000 project and you immediately go, great, I'm going to buy a $50,000 camera to get the job done. Well, What about the lights? What about the audio? What about all the other aspects of that production that you have to think through? Every step of the way, every tool, every technique, every process needs to focus on efficiency to keep those costs down for you, to maximize profitability, but also to speed up workflows. And so you can get to the next project that's $50,000. Because let's be real, in this business, in this line of work, it's not just the one project, it's that project plus the next one and 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 the next one. And when I talk about scaling, sustainability, that's what I'm talking about. It's not just doing the one project, it's how do you do the one project that gets you to the next one, that gets you to the next one, that keeps things going, that you're not constantly scaling up or scaling down or changing your workflow, buying something, selling something, getting something new, every time reinventing the wheel. Find ways to insulate your process from change. And usually for me, the answer has always been efficiency. If you can find a way to harness efficiency to your benefit, I promise you it will make such a difference in everything. The moment you're spending, I don't know, more than an hour, let's say, just as a general rule, if you're spending more than an hour on any one task, like hunting down footage or picking music or going through selects, editing photos, whatever it is, if it's taking more than an hour for one individual task, you probably should question that and say, is there a better way to do this? Instead of spending weeks mastering my audio, is there a way I can shortcut this process where I just have it done already beforehand, where I'm not constantly clip by clip manually adjusting my levels? What are the tools, what are the techniques that I can use to speed this process up? And I guarantee you, whatever that problem is that you're facing in the moment, whatever task it is that's taking you too long, if you start looking it up, solving that one problem one at a time, there's usually a solution. Hey, here's a better way. Here's a different approach, a different way to do whatever, however you were trained, whatever you thought was right, there probably is a better way, because nothing should take that long. In total, all the tasks added up can take a while. It could take a week, it could take a month, it could take a year. Again, these projects are all different. They're different sizes. How long does it take to build a house? How much does it cost to build a house? Well, houses are all different shapes and sizes. Are you talking about 100 square feet, a box? Or are you talking about a mansion? Or are you talking about an apartment complex? What are you talking about? You have to know the size of the project to really evaluate what's right and wrong. But if you know a house can be built in a month, but it's taking you a year, well, how can you speed that up? How can you be more efficient? If you're building a whole house in a day, also equally questionable. How are you getting it done so fast? Are these shortcuts safe, or am I exposed to more danger? The same is true for any project you're working on. Question those tasks that you're doing, how long they're taking, and see, is there a way to speed it up that doesn't sacrifice quality? There are so many of these lessons that I've had to learn over the years, day by day, bit by bit, questioning, okay, this is really painstaking. This is really tedious, whatever task I'm doing. Color grading, audio mastering, syncing footage, exporting, rendering, uploading, all the things, transferring files, getting a project set up. There's a lot of stuff that feels kind of tedious and can end up taking a long time if you're doing it syncing footage is another great example. Are you doing it manually or using an automated process like Pluralize or something like that? I still use Pluralize to this day, even though it's kind of outdated and there's like kind of native solutions, but I still think Pluralize, in Premiere anyway, works better than Premiere syncing, because Premiere syncing is one clip at a time, as far as I'm aware. Maybe there's a better way where you can sync everything at once, but I've never found how to do it natively in Premiere, and I still have my Pluralize license. So I still use that for syncing, but maybe you can take that a step further and get cameras that have time code and sync with Tentacle Sync or something like that. That's another great advantage to technology, and maybe it costs you an extra $300 or $400 for some adapters or for some dongles. But if you have cameras that support it, now all of a sudden you have another increase in efficiency. I've made other videos, plenty of videos, talking about how I can shoot with 2 cameras at the same time, just all by myself and not needing a second operator. That's not to do it necessarily cheaper. It's just to do it more efficiently. And I can have that second operator do something else. And now we can maximize output and gain the advantage. And other times, if I can't afford, if the project doesn't allow for a second shooter, then I am able to do more than just what I could do in the past individually, thinking I'm one person, I can only hold one camera. Audio, another huge factor. There's so many audio devices now that let a single operator do video, audio, all at the same time, not sacrificing quality. And yes, there are occasions where you'll need someone who just runs audio. You'll need that kind of sound engineer on set. But there's other times where that's a waste, that's excess, that's bloat. It's not necessary for the type of project you're doing. So you can slice and dice this a million different ways. But every step of the way, be thinking, okay, how do I do this efficiently? And I promise you, it will pay off incredibly. And the results will speak for themselves.